Hi there guys, got a video here today on a new rifle coming to the channel, and this one is the FX DRS Tactical. What I want to do in this video is just go over the rifle and show you everything that you may want to see both externally and internally within the rifle. And I'll also be pointing out some key features. Before we get started on that, this particular rifle here is a 177 sub 12 pound rifle, and it was purchased using my own money from the brilliant Crawley Surplus store. Right then, with that all out the way, onto the rifle, and what we're going to be doing is starting off at the back, then moving our way forward. So at the back here we have the AR buffer tube adapter. Now the rifle doesn't come from the factory with either a buffer tube or a stock for the back, so you are going to have to get one. Any standard mil-spec buffer tube should fit into the back, and to install it all you do is screw it into the back of the rifle. Then once you get it done up tight, you can back the stock off to get it nice and straight and in line with the action, then tighten that in place using the castle nut, this piece here. Now when you're ordering your parts, just make sure that you don't forget the castle nut, as some buffer tubes come with one fitted and others don't, so just be aware of that. I will also mention it is possible to fit a folding stock adapter at the back here, so if you're interested in having sort of a super compact rifle, you can fit a folding stock to the back nice and easily. Moving forward of that, we come to the AR grip. So this is the standard one that comes on the rifle, and it's very nice indeed. It's nice and thick, it has a rubberized texture, so it's nice and soft, and if you choose to swap it out, any standard AR pattern one will fit, although I will mention just make sure you get one with the beaver tail at the back here, as the flat top ones look a little funny onto the rifle. The other thing I'll mention is that we do also have a couple of threaded holes, one on either side, and what you can do with those is install a thumb rest. So this is just the one from Sabre Tactical. I got this from Airgun 101, and that can be just fitted to the side there, so you can have a thumb shelf on either the right or left hand side if you so choose. Moving on from the grip, we come to the trigger, and the DRS Tactical does come with a unique trigger blade, which just fits onto the standard post. I will say the trigger mechanism is the same one that's fitted to the standard DRS, and again it's fairly middle of the road, so not fantastic, but not terrible either. You can certainly get a lot worse for the money. And at this point I will mention that I don't think you can fit the Pro trigger upgrade to this particular rifle, as there's simply not enough room. Right then, moving forward of the trigger, and we come to the Plenum, this box on the bottom of the rifle. This is where the regulator pressure is stored, and it is the standard one fitted to both the sub 12 pound rifles as well as the higher power models. The only difference between the two rifles is that the sub 12 pound rifles are fitted with this small blanking piece. It fits into the rifle something like that, and what this piece does is limit the overall plenum volume, as well as restricting the flow of air between the plenum and the back of the valve, in turn limiting the maximum power of the rifle. I've removed mine just to slightly improve the overall efficiency of the rifle. However, this rifle here is still running at sub 12 pound power levels. The other thing I'll mention is that on the bottom of the plenum, just in the back here, we also have a fitting. If we remove this, this exposes a 1/8 BSP thread, which we can install a standard gauge into. So if you wanted to read the current set point of your regulator, you could do that on the standard rifle. And there's just a quick look at the plenum with a gauge installed into the bottom. Slightly above that we have the new style pressure gauge on the side of the rifle. The only difference between this one and the old one is that the outer case is now black instead of chrome. Although I will say I still prefer the look, with a gauge cover fitted. And another nice thing with the FX DRS Tactical is that you can fit the angled gauge bracket onto the side, so you can read the pressure of the rifle when you're sitting behind it. And again, there's just a quick look at the angled gauge bracket installed onto the side of the rifle, along with the regulator gauge in the bottom. So there we have it. On the other side of the action, we have the side lever cocking arm, and as always with the FX rifles, this is very smooth and super slick to use, so no complaints there. Moving forward to that, we have the mag well, so this is where your magazine goes, and I will mention at this point that unfortunately it isn't possible to use the FX Mega Mags with this particular rifle, as the magazine itself comes into contact with the Picatinny rail on top. That is a shame, as I really don't like the mini mags, these ones here, on this particular rifle, and I'm not sure if this is like it for all rifles, but this magazine is incredibly tight. It is really quite difficult to load, and what I have had to do when I'm loading the mag is actually use an Allen key to rotate the drum round, as trying to do it with your fingers is pretty much impossible. I do have a video on the channel already, which I fixed the mini mags. What I do is I just drill a load of holes around this back section here, and what that allows me to do is adjust the spring tension of the magazine so that it doesn't damage the pellets before they're loaded into the barrel, and it makes loading the mags a hell of a lot easier. Right then, up next we're going to be moving on to one of the more unique parts to the DRS Tactical, and that is the Picatinny top rail and aluminium handguard. So this is one lump of aluminium all the way from the back here, running over the top of the block, all the way to the front, so one solid piece of aluminium. On using this, I haven't noticed any major wobble or twist within the handguard itself. The aluminium is really nice and thick, and I really haven't noticed any movement whatsoever. The part itself is bolted to the block directly, so we have 2 bolts in the front of the block here, along with 4 along the top, so 1, 2, 3 and 4. The Picatinny rail on the top here is a parallel rail, so it is parallel with the barrel, and you can mount either a scope, a red dot, or maybe even a laser aim module to the front there. And along the bottom we have a full length arc rail, along with a number of M-lock slots in the bottom for accessories if you want to fit them. The only thing I'll note about the M-lock slots in the bottom is that if you end up screwing an accessory into there, just be careful, as the M-lock slots and the air cylinder are quite close together, so if you use long or standard length screws, they may go into the bottom and mark the cylinder. Moving on to the sides of the handguard, we have a number of decorative slots in the side, and then we have a couple of threaded holes, one on either side, and I think these are for a sling stud. So there are some threaded sling studs that you can buy and screw into the side of the handguard. The decorative slots aren't M-lock slots, they're just decorative. The only other thing I'll mention about the top rail is that it's not retrofittable to older DRSs, as these 2 threaded holes in the block in the front here aren't present on older blocks. And there's just a quick look at the piece itself removed from the rifle. Next up, we're going to be moving over to the air cylinder and the barrel, and for those not familiar with the DRS, the air cylinder is actually wrapped around the barrel. What this does is help keep the overall profile of the rifle nice and compact, as you don't have to find room for an external cylinder onto the rifle itself. The cylinder on this particular rifle is 208 cc's, and from a full 230 bar fill, I'm getting about 150 shots, with the rifle running at about 11.8 foot-pounds using JSB heavies. On the end of the cylinder there is a 1/2 inch UNF beneath this cap here, and that allows you to screw on a moderator to the end of the shroud if you want to. I will say that is recommended as the air cylinder itself provides no moderation and the barrel does come to pretty much the end of the cylinder, so it is pretty loud when shooting without a mod. The only other thing I'll mention about the air cylinder is I haven't noticed any major change in point of impact between the cylinder being low and full up. So what I mean by that is if you shoot the rifle down to say 100 bar, then fill it up to 200 bar, the point of impact isn't rapidly different. I only mention that because that was a question I got fairly regularly with my other DRS, so I thought I'd mention it here just to clear that up. Right then, on to the barrel. So the barrel itself is the standard liner system found in most FX rifles. However, an interesting change for this particular barrel is that the liner itself is unchoked. Now this could have been done to better suit shooting slugs, however I don't know if all liners are now unchoked. This one certainly is, but if you have one of these rifles and can get the liner out, I'd be interested to hear if your one is unchoked as well, or maybe this is just a change that they're trying out. With that said, we can move on to the insides of the block, starting with the regulator, these three brass components here. Now, the regulator in this particular rifle is the standard AMP regulator, which for me personally has performed very well. Over an entire magazine, so that's 16 shots, I'm getting an average FPS extreme spread of around 11, which from a brand new rifle using unweighed unsalted pellets is pretty good. The regulator fitted to this rifle uses the new components like the brass regulator piston and the regulator body with the 4 holes around the outside. And like all AMP regulators, it is externally adjustable, so you can increase the reg pressure whilst the rifle is pressurized. However, to decrease reg pressure, you will have to fully degas the rifle. From the factory, the sub 12 pound rifles will be fitted with an anti-tamper plug in the end of the adjuster screw there. However, that's been removed from this particular rifle. It's just a little piece of plastic pushed into the end there, and the way I get them out is just by using a small needle or something similar to poke the side of the plastic, then gently lever it out. Moving down from that, we come to the valve assembly. So this is our valve return spring, along with the valve stem and valve body itself. So these components go together just like that, and when we take a shot, the hammer knocks the valve off its seat, opening the valve and allowing air to flow through and push a pellet down the end of the barrel. It's the standard valve found in the FX DRS, as well as the other rifles like the Pantera and King. Moving on from that, in the rear of the block we come to the hammer spring adjuster, this piece here. Unfortunately, it is the same brass one found in the standard DRS, and the problem with these is that after a bit of use, the spring eats away at the brass and it deposits brass debris within the block itself. Now, I do make a replacement one from stainless steel which doesn't have the same problem, but that was a little disappointing to see, as that is a fairly common problem with the older DRSs. But with that said, I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to point out in the block and the rifle itself. For the most part, it's a very well put together rifle with a load of nice features. I suppose the last thing I want to do is show you how the rifle shoots, and I do want to mention very briefly that the shooting footage was done before the rifle was disassembled, so I was shooting it as it came out of the factory. So let's go down range and I'll show you how the rifle shot. Right then, so here we are all set up in Pete's Airgun Farm in the 50-yard range. I have a target set out on the back wall and I'm just doing some 5-shot groups. For the testing, I am using the H&N Barracuda 8s, which have performed the best through the rifle, although I did do a full pellet test, including pretty much every single JSB, H&N, QYS, along with a load of other oddball pellets, and the 8s came out on top. The other thing that I'll mention is that for all these groups here I was using the magazine, although I will say the rifle does shoot slightly more accurately when just single shot loading the pellets into the barrel. The rifle itself performed okay at 50 yards, but moving the target in a little closer down to 30 yards, and you can see that the groups tighten up quite a bit. You do have to remember that the rifle itself is around £800 and it's not designed with target shooting in mind. Having said that, the rifle itself did perform quite well and I was really quite enjoying shooting it. But with that said, that's pretty much all the range footage I'm going to show you, so we'll go back over to the bench, I'll show you the groups, then we'll finish out the video. Right then, so I'll just get you a nice quick look at the targets. These two rows at the top here were done at 50 yards. These two rows down here were done at 30 yards. The average edge-to-edge group size from the 50-yard targets is between 30 and 35 millimeters, and at 30 yards that reduces to around 20 mil groups on average. So not super fantastic, but not utterly rubbish either. Here's just a quick look at the targets. With that all said, there you have the FX DRS Tactical. For me personally, I think the DRS is one of the best rifles that FX make. It's so unique, customizable and fun to shoot that currently it's one of my go-to rifles. The plan for this particular rifle is to shorten the barrel and cylinder down to just in front of the handguard, put a nice fancy quick detach mod on the end, and then build the rifle out like a mini DMR. But with that said, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting or useful, and I'll see you in the next one.